consider buying your processed oboe and bassoon cane from those friendly folks over at Barton Cane. Processed with care and precision for your everyday reed-making needs. Take the pain and injury out of reed-making by letting Barton Cane do the hard, repetitive, boring stuff. Free up time for practicing, happy hours, hikes, baking, and spending time with friends and family. Barton Cane, here for you. Visit www.bartoncane.com.
Specializing in the finest assortment of oboes, clarinets, bassoons, and their accessories, RDG Woodwinds serves musicians around the world. Their employees are all professional musicians who have a deep knowledge of the products that they sell. RDG's repair shop has an international reputation with a combined 100 plus years of service among the 5 repair technicians. Plain and simple, RDG provides excellent products and fabulous customer service. Visit them at rdgwoodwinds.com. They look forward to working with you.
Hi, I'm Galit Kaunitz.
And I'm Jackie Wilson, and you're listening to Double Reed Dish,
a podcast for oboists,
bassoonists,
and the people who love them.
So we are both cramming this dish in the middle of a workday, in the middle of a week. Actually, today, Wednesday at noon, is the exact midpoint of the semester for me.
Oh.
And
this is your meridian.
We're just kind of winging it. But we have had occasion over the last week to be reminded. It's like, oh, so-and-so listens. Oh, I didn't know so-and-so listens. And we've gotten like several texts of like, hey, with my friend who like loves your podcast. Hey, wanted to reach out. I love the podcast. And so more than ever, I'm aware that people are listening.
Which is your favorite thing, right?
I have nothing, to quote John Cage, I have nothing to say, and I'm saying it.
Well, okay, tell us about one really phenomenal interaction that you had recently.
Yes, I got the most wonderful email over the... We're laughing because I've restarted this sentence like honestly 3 times. I need to focus. Okay. I got the most fabulous email over the weekend. Such a lovely surprise from a listener, Jonathan Bethard. I want to I can't say Jonathan Bethard. It's a tongue twister a little bit. Anyway, Jonathan is a faculty member at the University of South Florida, is an anthropologist, but also a bassoonist, and listens, and decided to reach out regarding my Cougar Reed program, which is a thing I do for band directors in Washington State, where when they have need-based situations, they can request reeds, and I give them some of my surplus reeds. And yes, Jonathan reached out and was like, how can I support you? And gave me a donation to help support the program.
That is so stinking cool.
And I'll be honest, there are times that program feels a little bit like one more thing to do, or just like, oh God, is this sustainable? Like, I'm not a professional reed maker. Like, how long? And then I get something that's a shot in the arm that's like, okay, I don't know how long, but for now, keep going. And so it was just such a nice, kind of like we were talking about last time, like just find opportunities to affirm one another because you don't know how much someone needs it. And so yes, shout out Jonathan, you're fabulous. You made me feel so special and so supported. And thank you so much.
I also want to shout out a listener named, oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm going to massacre this name. Sigurd Grieve, I believe, who is a listener from Oslo. And they reached out via a friend of mine who was like visiting Oslo, and they had occasion to meet, and the podcast came up.
The thought that people in Oslo listen to this and we're just like, what should we talk about today? I don't know. It's midterms. I'm tired.
Well, the wild part of it too is that like we're just talking to our best friend.
Yeah.
You know, like, but then like other people are part of it, but it's so cool.
There's a person on staff at WSU in the School of Music who's like a promoter and marketer, and he reached out and was like, your Double Read podcast, can I put that on the university's list of podcasts? And I was like, we're not really like affiliated with the university. It's more an independent project. And I was like just picturing like dishes about like double read dating, like being at my job on this list.
No.
Like I was like, oh gosh, I hope the provost doesn't tune in, or
The provost is taking notes about double read dating. Ooh, how fascinating. So speaking of like recording this dish in between things, I am coming to you from a hotel in Mobile, Alabama.
You certainly are. Some of the wall art is capturing my attention, but again, I will try my best to focus.
It's really distracting.
It appears to be like a Siberian tiger with
No, it's a zebra.
a marching band hat on.
Yeah, it's a zebra whose stripes are falling off.
But then what's with the hat? The hat looks like
don't
the
know.
guards at the Royal Palace.
I think the decor is supposed to be Mardi Gras themed. So that's where the yellow curtains come in.
Oh, okay. So what are you there for?
Yeah, I'm here because I am going to play on a concert with Yo-Yo Ma.
Oh my God.
I can't honestly believe it.
That's amazing.
Like we're playing Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony and then the Elgar Cello Concerto with Yo-Yo Ma. And I am 100% sure that I'm just going to weep throughout this entire concert.
That's a pretty epic program.
Uh-huh. I'm just going to sob the entire time.
Oh, that's amazing. Have they given you directions on like pictures?
We have not been cleared for pictures yet.
I remember when I was a student at BU, Renee Fleming came to give a master class, and I, of course, was not there because I'm a bassoonist, not a voice student, but I was in the hallway when she was walking down the hall, and I was like trying to act like I was texting somebody, but I was taking a picture.
Very smooth.
And like one of the people escorting her, like put his hand up and was like, "No pictures." I was like, "Come on, let me take a picture."
Did she wave at you? Did she give you a little
No,
finger
it
wiggle?
was very crowded. It was not a special moment between the two of us.
Oh, bummer.
But
Maybe Yo-Yo Ma and I will have a special moment.
maybe you will. Maybe you'll be like playing and he'll like turn around from the weird cello boxes that they play on.
Yeah, and he'll look specifically at oboe too,
He'll like turn around and point.
right at
Be
me,
like, yes.
and be like, "Those were some nice low B's, ma'am."
good response. I know that's not easy.
If that doesn't happen, I consider it a failure.
ACDC Reads is a one-woman bassoon read workshop in Minnesota run by Dr. Ariel Detweiler, producing over 1,500 reads per year. Selling beginner bassoon reads, advanced bassoon reads, and contrabassoon reads, ACDC Reads are hailed by customers for their even intonation, ease of response in all registers, warm tone quality, and strong low register. Every reed is made from tube cane processed in-house to Ariel's specifications using Rigati or Lavaro cane and a Rieger 1A shape. You'll also find bassoon-themed gifts in the shop, including greeting cards, stickers, artistic prints, and the ever-popular Black Wing bassoon pencil. Make sure to follow ACDC Reads on Instagram, where Ariel posts artistic photos and educational stories about her everyday experiences with reed making. ACDC Reads is a proud sponsor of Double Read Dish, sharing positive and uplifting interviews to inspire and connect the bassoon community around the world. Find ACDC Reads at www.acdcreads.com or at retailers like Chemical City Double Reads, Midwest Musical Imports, or Reed Supplies Canada. Try out ACDC Reads today and let the reed do the work.
Chemical City Double Reeds is a full-service double reed shop specializing in the sale of instruments, cane, accessories, and sheet music. Double Reed Dish listeners can enjoy free shipping with code DRDISH. Visit them in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or online at www.chemicalcityreeds.com. We are delighted to welcome to the podcast Dave Wells, Assistant Professor of Bassoon at Appalachian State University. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We love to start by asking our guests how they started playing their instruments. So could you tell us how you were introduced to the bassoon?
Yeah, I joined band in fifth grade and I started on the flute because we had a flute in the closet. And so that was easy. And that was all right, but I wanted to move somewhere else. And I wanted to play next year the saxophone, but they're out of saxophone, so they handed me a clarinet instead. And that was also okay. But I hadn't found my voice yet. And I was lucky enough to have an elementary school band director who was a bassoonist. And he did something which at the time seemed very, I don't know, sort of generous or unusual, but now I understand exactly why he did it. He would, if you wanted to play a different instrument the next year, he would have you come to a little 1 or 2 week summer camp to get the basics of that instrument. So I think for him, that meant that he didn't have to be starting a bunch of newbies all together in the fall. But anyway, that summer after I think it was after sixth grade, he decided he was going to start a bunch of people on bassoon. So he rounded up as many instruments as he could find, which I think was 4, maybe 5, and started a few of us. And I took to it pretty much right away. I remember pretty early on, I don't remember now if it was before I had the instrument in my hands or after, my dad playing a bit of The Rite of Spring for me and telling me that thing at the beginning was a bassoon. I was like, what? This can do that? I don't understand, but it's so big. Why is it playing so high? And that was the sort of, I think, start of me being hooked on it, between the sound and the weirdness of it.
Yeah, I still don't understand, but
Yeah.
So can you talk us through, you said you took to it right away, but maybe deciding like, oh, I think I want to pursue this as a career path. And like, when did that happen for you? And how did that change how you approached the instrument in your youth?
That took a bit longer. I was a very nerdy kid. I'm a very nerdy adult also, but going to college, I was not sure whether I wanted to be on a music track or a science track. And by the time I got actually to applying to schools and things like that, I narrowed it down pretty much to either bassoon or archaeology. So I looked at schools that had programs in both, and I ended up at Arizona State, which had great programs in both. And my advisor there, my music advisor, even when I went, like before I had decided on schools, she had worked out a whole plan for me and said, okay, it's much easier to switch out of music than into music. So why don't you start as a music major with an archaeology minor or anthropology minor, and then, try it out for a year or two. And then if you want to jump ship and go over to anthropology, you'll be like on the track to still do that in 4 years. So I thought that was a great idea. And, once I got there and was into lessons and ensembles and everything, I realized pretty quickly that music was the real track for me. And I still did as much anthropology as I could. And when in the summers, when some of my friends and colleagues were doing, summer festivals and things, I went off and did field schools and was digging places. So I was having my fun doing that, which in retrospect maybe wasn't the most constructive thing for my musical career, but it sure was fun at the time. But my process of figuring out what I wanted to do with my career was kind of one of subtraction, I think. All I really knew going into college was that I wanted to play the bassoon and do something with it. And I think maybe the first thing that fell away was the idea of a music education track. And that was for a variety of reasons, with some experiences with music educators in my youth who didn't exactly inspire me to follow their paths.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point I was, so I was sort of moving towards I was moving towards a performance path, and that was my major, but I didn't really know what that meant, what I wanted to do with it. And at some point, in talking to people and seeing what people did on the audition trail and things like that, I realized, okay, I don't really think I want to have a full-time orchestra job. I wasn't really interested in the path to getting there, or in what I saw as a very sort of limiting, and my impression at the time is not necessarily the reality of what the job actually is, but I saw it as a kind of limited, like, oh, I'm just going to sit in an orchestra and play the same things over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So that went away as well. And so what's left, things like chamber music and college teaching. And I don't know, I was particularly inspired in my undergrad, I think, by my teacher, Jeff Lyman, who's now at Michigan, in terms of mixing performance and teaching and scholarship. And, back to that nerdy kid thing, scholarship has always been a very important part of what I've done. And so I saw that as a potential path forward. And coming out of college, for lack of a better idea, went right into a master's program, and coming out of that, for lack of a better idea, went right into a DMA program, and sort of solidified this sort of path towards college teaching in that way.
So, can you tell us what happened after graduation with your doctorate and how you made your way over to Appalachian State?
Yes, it was a kind of a long path to get to Appalachian State. What immediately happened after graduation is that my amazing wife, Veronica, we weren't quite yet married at that time. She's a librarian, and we finished grad school at the same time. And not surprisingly, there were more library jobs than bassoon jobs open right then. So she got a job at University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, and we moved in very short order out there. And I set about just sort of getting established in the freelance scene. And one of the first things I did, and I can pretty much track most of the things that I ended up doing in California, to getting in touch with Nicholas Custer, professor of bassoon at University of the Pacific, which is the school where Veronica's new job was. And I basically went to Nick Custer and said, "Hey, I'm a recently graduated DMA bassoonist in town with very little to do. Do you have anything for me to do?" And so we got together and played duets and started to get to know each other a little bit. And she connected me with my first freelance gig, which led to another, which led to another, which led to another. She also roped me into Meg Quigley Vivaldi competition, which is a whole other side path. But through that first gig, I met some people who introduced me to people at Sacramento State, and I ended up getting an adjunct job there. And I taught there for 12 years. Initially hired to teach one bassoonist. That was the entire studio at the time. And then another bassoonist showed up, and then I started to build the studio. And then they found out that I also have a degree in music history. So I started teaching music history and some GE classes. So I was always adjunct there, and I ended up with basically a full-time teaching load for the last quite a few years. And that experience led me to, I had sort of always had my eye on the tenure track job, and have sort of living as if I had one, with the full-time teaching thing, confirmed that's indeed what I wanted to do. So I was trying to figure out how to make that work, and I'd sort of applied to things on and off over the years, and I decided last year to get really serious about it. And luckily, there were a number of jobs out there at the same time, and so it was nice to get a bunch of experience right in short order like that. And when I came to interview at App State, I left thinking, "Oh, this is really fantastic," but I don't think we're going to move there, because Veronica had a great job in California. And then once I got offered the job, we started talking about it and considering it, and realized that she was ready for a change, and I was ready for a change. So here we are.
Awesome. We kind of blew past the whole like masters in music history, and actually your interest in history and placing the bassoon and bassoon performance in a historical context is really a big part of who you are as an artist. So, could we kind of start that discussion by hearing about how you got interested in music history and historical performance, and how you set about getting experience and training in those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. In a way, that has been a thread through my entire um, education and life, really. I mean, one of my first musical memories was playing recorder duets with my dad when I was a kid. We were playing like Michael Pretorius duets and things out of Anna Magdalena Bach's Notebook and things like that. So I had that kind of initial exposure to early music in that way. And in my undergrad at Arizona State, I played in a Baroque ensemble, a little chamber group. And I was the only one in the group who did not have a period instrument. So they were all playing period instruments at A equals 415 hertz. And I was playing my Fox 240 down a half step. And let me tell you, F flat minor is a heck of a key to play in. But that got me my first experience with the historical performance practice, even though it wasn't the historical instrument. Then in my master's at Florida State, I played in some of the early music ensembles. Stacy Spring was there at the same time as me, and she was playing in, I think, recorder consorts and shawm bands and things, and she roped me in to some of those, and I had a lot of fun in both of those kinds of groups, and also a Baroque oboe band playing the Thai, the English horn precursor. And once you're in one of those groups, you have access to the instrumentarium, which was just a big room full of stuff, which was great. And I discovered at some point that there was a Baroque bassoon sitting in a cabinet, unused, unloved. So I just got it out and started messing around with it a little bit. And I was working on the Telemann F minor sonata for my master's recital. And my teacher, Jeff Kiesiger, suggested at some point, he said, well, why don't you just try playing it on that Baroque instrument just to see what it's like and get an idea of how it could work, how that might inform your playing on the modern instrument. And as I'm somewhat prone to do, I sort of took that and ran with it and did something he didn't intend, which was that I ended up performing it on that instrument without any real training, except a little bit of help from some of the other people in the early music ensembles. So that was my first time really playing, a period bassoon, certainly, although I'd been getting that other period instrument experience. And through all of this, I'd been more generally interested in history as well. So when it came time to look at DMA programs, I knew I wanted something that had a very academic thrust to the program. I knew I wanted to get more experience on historical bassoons and things. And so studying with Mark Vallone at Wisconsin was ideal for that, because the program involved a lot of academics. Mark is he can play anything, but he's a particular period instrument specialist, so I knew I could get that from him. And then it ended up in the program that we had to have a doctoral minor, which could be anything. I knew composers who had doctoral minors in environmental studies because their work had to do with writing music about nature and the environment, and that made a lot of sense for them. Most people did either, most performance DMA folks did history or theory, and I did history. I also had an assistantship that involved being a TA for these massive music appreciation classes. So I was teaching a bit of history alongside that as well, and getting to know all of the musicology faculty. And I realized at a certain point that the difference between a doctoral minor in music history and a master's in musicology was about 1 year of work. it was a lot of work, a thesis, comprehensive exams, extra coursework, all that. But I managed to finagle a little bit more funding so I could do that. So I just sort of put that in the middle of my DMA.
Mm,
I didn't like
smart.
pause the DMA. I was still in lessons and all that through there, but I actually finished the MA the year before I finished the DMA. So I did them at the same time, more or less. Um, and a lot of the reason I did that was to be a little more marketable when I was looking for academic jobs, and that has proven to be very valuable.
Mhm.
Now, although my job officially is assistant professor of bassoon at App State, I am teaching a music history class still, and I've been sort of rolled into the musicology faculty, and I'm now involved in a curriculum redesign that we're just embarking on, which
Mhm.
is exciting, and I don't think I would get to do that if I didn't have at least that credential of the MA in musicology.
Okay, so I have a couple of follow-ups. So you don't just play the Baroque bassoon because I know you well. I know you also play the classical bassoon and the French bassoon and the Dulcian. I never know if I'm even pronouncing that right. Like you do it all. And so can you talk to us a little bit about like expanding beyond the Baroque bassoon? Is that kind of a natural part of studying uh period instruments? And then I would guess like they all have their own fingerings, they have their own reeds. Like how do you keep it all straight? And it just seems like its own universe and world. What was that like delving into that, especially for a listener who's maybe intrigued by historical performance?
Yeah, I mean it's sort of a natural evolution to go from the Baroque bassoon to the other things. I mean, in a sense, it's like a slippery slope. Like you do the one old bassoon, you're like, ooh, but then there's that other one. Ooh, and then there's that other one. Oh, and then I could play this thing, and then I could play that kind of music. Um, in a way, for me, I feel like my there's been a constant thread in my career of what can I find that's weirder? What can I do that, like, what other instrument can I try that's even weirder than the ones I've tried already? Um, but yeah, I mean that going back to my educational experience a bit, when I went to study with Marc Bellone, I knew that Baroque bassoon was something I wanted to pursue. But one thing that I learned very quickly when studying with him was that he has a fantastic collection of bassoons, and he's very generous with them. So when I studied with him, he had, I think, four Baroque bassoons, and three were pretty much always in the hands of students. Um, but every now and then he would mention other instruments, and finally one day I asked him, Marc, how many bassoons do you have? And he couldn't give me an exact number. It's like, okay, that's a lot of bassoons. Um, and all that's to say that as I started learning what he had, I had to come up with a lecture recital at one point, and my um, dissertation topic did not lend itself well to that. I was writing about the history of the bassoon in jazz, and I could have played some stuff, but what I was really talking about, like existing recordings and things, so that didn't work really well for a lecture recital. So basically, I constructed a lecture recital project that was an excuse to borrow three of Marc's bassoons for a year. So I borrowed three 19th century bassoons from him, originals by Savary, Heckel, and Buffet. And um, he's performed on all those instruments, so he was able to give me really good instruction on them. I mean, he went through the Paris Conservatory under Maurice Allard, so playing the Buffet was his start. So it was great to get that instruction from him, but also to play those others. And so that was my experience playing some 19th century period instruments. My first experience doing that. Once I got more seriously into historical performance in my career, I went with Baroque first, and then actually had the opportunity to study a bit with Marc again at a summer program in Oregon, part of the Oregon Bach Festival, and that was half Baroque, half classical. So that was my first instruction on the classical period bassoon. Um, and then I got a lot of these things really go back to Mark, and I think from having that experience playing those instruments, because there was what now maybe 4 years ago, I got a call from a group in Austin, Texas, that does largely Baroque period performance, but they were starting to venture into 19th century stuff, and they were doing Mendelssohn's Elijah, and Mark was playing principal, and they needed someone who could play second, and I was able to use one of Mark's instruments, and he knew that I had done that, played a bit on that instrument before, so that got me my entry into that. I've since played with that group a couple more times, once on classical bassoon. I'm just now prepping for a concert with them next month, and I have a borrowed 1850s, I think, Heckel for that I'm getting acquainted with now. And I've done some other stuff with that. With other instruments, you mentioned the other things with Buffet as well. I did Stravinsky Soldier's Tale on Buffet with a whole group doing everything on period instruments, which was just fantastic. And it's really interesting, especially with this 19th and early 20th century repertoire that we know so well, as we just think of as, modern orchestra pieces. It's fascinating to find out how different they sound and feel on these older instruments. Because, particularly in the 19th century, there was so much going on with different bassoons in different places and different sounds, beyond just the simple French and German kind of dichotomy that we think of. And in a way, that can be a whole rabbit hole of, okay, well, which bassoon is really the proper one for this particular performance? Is it what the composer knew and expected, or is it what they actually got, or is it like and are you talking about the premiere or a later thing? And I don't know. So you can get all tangled up in knots doing that. But even if you just get kind of close, it adds a lot of context and insight into what's going on, how the instruments blend with each other. It's often very different than how the modern instruments blend with each other. How, the relative volumes of different instruments can be quite different as well. And, really that's at the heart of why we do this playing of these old instruments. The historically informed performance on period instruments is for that understanding, to get greater insight into why composers wrote the way they did, how the pieces actually function on these instruments. And, particularly on the Baroque instrument, I've had the experience many times of something that I've played on the modern bassoon that actually works better, is more idiomatic, feels better, sounds better on the Baroque instrument. And that happens really on all of these period bassoons. I've had that experience with every single one of them in one respect or another. Sorry, I was just remembering the other part of your question about the fingerings and the reeds, and how I keep them all straight is with difficulty. The more time I spend on any one of the instruments, the easier it is to go back to. So I'm at the point now where pretty much at any time I can pick up my Baroque bassoon, and as long as I have some decent reeds, I can in a practice session or two feel like I'm ready to go again on that instrument. The ones that I've played less frequently, like the Buffet, or even the classical bassoon, because I haven't played that one as much, it takes me a little while. So I have to, look at my sort of performance calendar and see what's coming up, and make sure that when I need one of those bassoons that's less familiar to me, I have to start a little earlier in reacquainting myself with some of the details of the fingerings, making sure that I've got reeds that are happy at whatever pitch I need them to be. And that's, especially with the 19th century stuff, sometimes a little bit variable. You might be at 435 or 440 or 438 or something. So I have to get that all going. But with those, I can really feel that like the, so some of that subconscious processing going on that say there's a bassoon that I played 6 months ago and then I put it away for a while because I have other responsibilities and priorities, and then I get it back out again. It's always easier than the last time I got it out again. It still may take me a while to get it back to the point where I'm ready to play it in public, but
Mhm.
it's easier the next time. So I really enjoy that experience of going back to something that felt really difficult the previous time, and maybe it still feels difficult, but it's not as bad usually.
hmm Your comment about playing something on a period instrument and forming your experience on the modern bassoon is something we've heard a lot. But I feel like we've always heard it in a Baroque context, and maybe this is a little too niche. Maybe this is too down the rabbit hole. But I did wonder for a piece like the Mozart Concerto that is so ubiquitous. Like I don't know if you've ever played it on the classical bassoon or what, but I feel like our discussion of that is always so siloed into the Baroque era, and that you're unique in that you've had this experience that yes, Soldier's Tale on a period French bassoon. It's so unique, but yeah, I guess for something like Mozart, I wonder how that what that experience you get what I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've not performed the Mozart Concerto on the classical bassoon. I've worked on it a bit.
Mhm.
Um, so I've at least a bit of a sense of it. And I mean, I guess one thing that sticks, or the first thing that comes to my mind with that is about the second movement and the degree to which the different colors, the different tone colors in the different registers of the instrument, um, can sort of change how you, I mean, maybe not a drastic change in approach, but they sort of suggest things about character that maybe we don't get so much on the modern bassoon, which is designed to be homogeneous through the range as, as much as possible. Um, but just some of the classical bassoon, um, in a lot of ways favors the sort of high harmonics of the sound. Um, and especially compared to to Baroque bassoon, Baroque bassoon, and it depends on the exact original maker, what's being copied, and of course personal reed styles and sound concepts and whatnot. But it tends to be much lower, much more of the fundamentals and the lower harmonics. It's really a continuo instrument a lot of the time, and so it's got that sort of bassy feel to a lot of it. Whereas the classical bassoon, it's now prioritizing the higher harmonics. It's cutting through larger orchestras. It's projecting into larger halls, and there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more connection between the classical bassoon and the modern French bassoon, the buffet, than there is between the classical bassoon and um, a modern German bassoon, say. So it's got more of that singing quality, that vocal thing, and we're all the time, particularly in the second movement of Mozart, talking about the connection to Mozart opera, to Marriage of Figaro, and so I think feeling that vocal connection really just changes how we can approach that movement and the kinds of things that we bring out in the sound.
All of this, your entrepreneurial mindset when you moved to uh, California and reached out to Nicholas Custer and started working at Sacramento State. And even going back to your doctorate, where you saw an opportunity to make yourself more marketable, getting an MA in musicology. This all speaks to like a very innovative and uh I can't think of the word that I'm looking for, but you seem to be a person who takes opportunities as they come and makes the most of them. It's a really great quality. And um when you were describing, you know, moving to California and starting fresh, um I was really impressed by your initiative to reach out and start making those connections for yourself. And a lot of times networking has like a negative connotation to it. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about like the power of making friends in the field and how that can um, mutually propel everyone forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I I know exactly what you mean about that sort of connotation that networking gets sometimes, or the kind of feeling that we have about it of it seems like a very businessy thing, and we're musicians and we're not in the business world. We're in this separate artistic world. Um, but networking is absolutely critical to, particularly the freelancer kind of lifestyle, or the portfolio career um, sort of way of making a living. And I can, again, going back to that very first gig I had in California, I can think of a whole bunch of other people there who are to this day close friends and collaborators, who I've done all sorts of projects with. And, um, it's part of it's that we get along well, and they're lovely people, and we work well together. I think there's a lot to be said for, part of the network isn't just meeting people and reaching out to people, but it's, as you mentioned, grabbing the opportunities that do present themselves and showing up very well prepared for whatever it is. Because if you do that, then the people you meet through whatever project, event, concert, rehearsal, whatever it is, will remember that, and remember that you're the kind of person who shows up ready to do whatever needs to be done, and ready to work collaboratively with others. And that will lead to more opportunities along the way. And, um, I think you're very kind talking about the sort of entrepreneurial aspect of my career, or that idea of grabbing the opportunities as they come up. Some of it, I think, is the flip side of that is that sometimes I find I have too many interests and ideas and things I want to do, and too many opportunities, and learning to say no to some things has been a um, difficult lesson as well, that I'm still trying to learn with that.
I know that a lot of people are in that space right now. Jobs are
Hmm.
extremely hard to come by, and for whatever reason, people end up in a place. And it's sort of this idea of making the best of where you are and your current situation, and how you do that successfully. It seems like you've really hit the nail on the head of how you were able to make a very full career and a full life, starting from basically nothing.
Yes, I mean, I think that there's a number of aspects to making that work, and one of them is, getting up the courage to reach out to people initially. In a way, I think I
Yeah,
was just
that can be
very
really intimidating and hard.
absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, and one thing that can make that a little easier, I think, is if you feel well prepared for whatever it is that you're reaching out about and for. You know, like I mentioned, when I first reached out to Nicolasa Custer, and the first thing she wanted to do was to get together and play duets. And partially that was just like a nice get to know each other, hang out, play bassoon a little bit kind of thing. But I think it was also okay, can this guy play? Could I sit next to him in a section? Can I recommend him for things? Um, so, as soon as she asked me to do that, I got out all the duets that I had, and started working and reminding myself of things and all that. And luckily, one of the things that she pulled out to play was the Mignone duo, um, that I had played a couple of times, and is not the easiest thing to sit down and sight read, but I had refreshed my memory on it, and you know I think came off really well with that. But that's just one situation. I think whatever the situation is. But particularly for playing jobs, I think that kind of thing is common. To meet somebody for the first time, you may just need to go play a little bit with them. So if you can feel really ready to do that, I think that might make it easier to actually reach out to that person, and be able to do that. And then that's, with all those sorts of other opportunities as well, as things came up, I feel that I was able to do so much with them by taking that same kind of approach and preparing, maybe sometimes over preparing for them, so that I could always put my best foot forward, so that all the new people I was meeting could see, the best version of me that I could put out there. Because I think that makes it easier for them to then, want to work with you again and recommend you for things and connect you with those other things. And I think, part of that for me has always been that I feel like I talk sometimes about specializing in certain things, but I feel like I'm a generalist in a lot of ways. And I think that has been very beneficial in my career, that, oh, okay, you need somebody to play second bassoon. Okay, I've spent a lot of time doing that. Oh, you need contrabassoon? I can do that. Oh, you need somebody to go, this is a real thing, to go play a piece in an art gallery opening and collaborating with an artist, and there's this piece where you have to circular breathe for 4 minutes and play lots of weird sounds. Oh yeah, okay, I can do that too. And I've just sort of picked these things up along the way, but I think there's also a particular mindset of being willing to try all of these things, and to try different things, and being willing to put in the homework to, even if it's something that is a bit outside my area of experience, being willing to try it and prepare for it the best I can, so that whatever opportunity that is might create other opportunities in that area or other similar areas as well.
So, okay, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about higher ed job seeking. It's a tough market, and it's getting tougher every year with so many amazing qualified candidates graduating from doctoral programs, and it's amazing when somebody wins a job. So I would love to hear your advice about job seeking on the higher ed market, and what advice you might have for people who are looking.
Yeah, it's a tough process. I think one of the greatest things I can advise is apply for every job you can. Because you will, like anything else, it's a skill. It takes practice, and you need experience in doing it. I mean, there are people who get the first job they apply for, and that's great for them. That was not my experience at all. And I think one thing that really helped me, as I mentioned, in that I applied for a bunch of jobs in the year that I got my offer from Appalachian State. And I certainly, not all of them ask for the same things, of course, but there's a lot of things that are always going to come up. You always have to submit a letter. You always have to submit a CV, often have to do a teaching statement, other various components that you get the chance to submit and think about and revise and submit a new version and revise again. And the more times you can go through that process, the better your materials are going to be, the better you're going to get at understanding how to tailor your materials to the particular job description, to the particular needs of each institution, to the interests of the people on the committee, to, all of the things that are going to make your materials stand out in the ways that they need to. And same thing for interviews. The more times that and again, it's not that you're going to get the same questions all the time, but even just the more times that you go through that process of now the phone interview is more or less a thing of the past, and we've got the Zoom interview. So, seeing that grid of people all looking at you as you're trying to sound intelligent, it can be very daunting. And so the more times you can do that and feel better about it and rehearse your answers and, be able to think on your feet for the question you didn't expect and all that sort of stuff, the better you'll be able to present yourself and do that. So that, I think that's one component. Just, get as much experience as you can in doing that. And then, if you're lucky enough to get the on-campus interview, back to something I was talking about earlier, prepare. I don't think I've ever played a recital program through as many times ahead of an actual public performance as I did for my interview recital at Appalachian State. And it wasn't perfect when I performed it there, but I sure felt a lot better about it because of how many times I had performed the whole thing start to finish before I went there. And I think that, selecting the repertoire is really important as well. And that gets also to that, idea of tailoring it to what the institution's needs and the committee's interests are as well. I knew that two people on my committee are also engaged in historically informed performance on period instruments. So I made sure to bring my Baroque bassoon. And I played like a 3-minute Telemann fantasy. So it wasn't that much, but it showed I could do it. It showed that I had that skill set that was, present in my CV, certainly, but that's not the same as actually getting on stage and doing it. And, that showed off that, I think, catered to some of the interests of the committee. It showed off one of my particular areas of specialty that I thought would distinguish me from other candidates. And I think finding as many of those things as possible in whatever avenue that is for you personally. I tried to do that in every aspect of the process as much as I could, in the teaching that I had to do in the interview, in the materials I submitted initially, in the answers I gave in the Zoom interview, all of that stuff. And you spoke particularly about that, the fact that the market is flooded a bit with very qualified candidates. And so I think that kind of showing off of your unique qualities, abilities, interests, at all stages of the process is of key importance.
Can we hear about a favorite memory from a past performance?
Yeah, I have a lot. But I think one of the performances that sticks in my mind the most, and I'm sure will forever, is yet another kind of strange aspect of my performing career. Another opportunity that popped up that I was kind of scared about, but went and grabbed, is I spent 9 years playing with a group kind of in the mold of Django Reinhardt's Hot Club of France. That's not traditionally bassoon at all. It's the traditional ensemble is violin, 3 guitars, and double bass. And I sort of took the place of the violin in this ensemble. And we got to play a bunch of cool things, but the one that really sticks in my mind was a time that we got to open 2 shows for Jay Leno. He was, just doing his touring, doing stand-up comedy. So we were in this big hall. It was, I don't know, 1,500 person hall, something like that. And no one had signed up to hear us. We were just there, playing for 15, 20 minutes at the start. And so they didn't even know they were going to hear music at all, let alone hot swing, let alone with a bassoonist in it. And so like most of the audience probably hadn't seen a bassoon. I mean, not that it was terribly up close, but not that they like most of them hadn't seen a bassoon in such an exposed way before, let alone see somebody improvise on one. But they just loved it. And I remember particularly as we were walking off stage at the first show, it was two shows in one day. Walking off stage at the first show, the crowd was all excited. They were giving us thunderous applause. We walk off, and Jay Leno is just there in the wings, clapping and enthusiastic and saying, "Great job, guys! That was fantastic!" Like, what am I doing? I'm a bassoon player playing jazz, talking to Jay Leno. This is bizarre, but it was wonderful.
Um, is there by chance a different kind of memory that you could share with us? Maybe something funny that has happened to you on stage? Maybe embarrassing?
Yeah, trying to trying to decide where to go with this. I I don't know if this is exactly what you want, but I'll give you one of the most embarrassing things that has ever happened on a stage. It wasn't exactly as a performer, but I was coaching once at a summer chamber music workshop for high schoolers. Great workshop, the kind of thing where students get a different ensemble, different piece, different coach every day, and they spend all day preparing that one movement or one piece, whatnot. So it's a pretty grueling kind of thing because you are meeting working with new people every day. You have to prepare a performance every night, all of this. There were a couple of sessions. So towards the end of the second session, everybody's tired. Come in one morning, find out what room I'm assigned to and what piece and what group and all that. And it turns out I'm on the stage at this institution. So I go in, there are no lights on. Like, I'm exhausted. I haven't had my caffeine yet. And the lights aren't on. Somebody's supposed to turn the lights on. So I go backstage. I'm like looking around with my phone flashlight. I can't find switches for the lights. Like I can't find like regular light switches. Can't find I'm opening boxes and things, like I can't find it. Finally, I find some switches and that are like poorly labeled. It says like orchestra, which says stage, orchestra, and something else. I press something and I like look out. I have to open the curtain to look out. Are there lights on the stage? No. Okay, not yet. Press something else. Anything? No. And then I look out and I see the pit slowly sinking on the stage. And like in and of itself, that wouldn't be bad, except that there's a piano half on the pit, half off the pit.
Oh my God.
Oh no.
And so I dart back in, like, what is going on? Like, there's no sound because, this is one of those pits that when it goes down, it's just like
It's air pressurized.
yeah. So it's just, so I hadn't heard anything happening. So I go back, I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? What's going on? Press buttons. I can't do anything. I'm frozen. I see this piano tilting more and more.
It goes.
And I hear one of the worst sounds I've ever heard in my life, which is the piano landing upside down in the pit. And then I go back and then I figure out which button takes it back up now that time has unfrozen. And I raise it again. And yeah, this Steinway is upside down. So I go, just then, of course, the students are starting to come in.
I assume this is not an upright piano.
No, this is a Steinway Grand.
Oh my God, Dave.
And the students are starting to come in, and I say, just hang out outside. We're going to start a little late this morning. I go find one of the people in charge of the thing, and I say, the piano's upside down in the hall. Um, there was a mishap with the pit, and
Been
you
like, I
didn't.
walked in and the piano was upside down. I have
I
no idea
I
what
had
happened.
I had that thought, but I was like, no, I don't know if like are there cameras in here? I don't know. Like I don't. So they start calling the people at the university and figuring this out, and you know, but long story short, piano was insured. They got a new piano out of it. But yeah, and some people after that, people had sort of a good laugh. I've got a photo of one of the other coaches who like posed got, like the Wicked Witch of the East with her hand like coming out from under the piano and
Oh.
whatnot. But yeah, we tried to figure out like the people from the university were like, I don't think it could have been anyone from your group that did it because of this and this and this. And so eventually figured out it was like the game of Mousetrap, this immensely complex series of mishaps that I managed to set in motion. It's like the piano shouldn't have been straddling the pit and the stage. The controls should have been labeled. The controls shouldn't have even been active. The lights should have been on, like all this other stuff. But man, that is that's the most embarrassing thing that's happened to me on a stage.
Oh my
Thank you for sharing that. I would have been traumatized for the rest of my life. You have a really good attitude.
It's taken a while for me to be able to tell that story.
God. Yeah, oh my God. Okay, well, other than make sure that the piano is not straddling the pit stage fault line, what advice do you have for a young musician who aspires to have a career like yours?
Oh, follow your interests and don't ever be afraid to be a student and start it over in something. My actual like historical performance career got started after I was already, a professional and out there in the world. And I spent a number of summers being a student again and going back and often hanging out with people a lot younger than me, who had jumped on that bandwagon a lot sooner than I did, which was a little difficult in some ways, but it was great. And I managed to have a long string of summers where I did that in some way. Like, okay, during the year, I'm going to be a professional. In the summer, I'm going to go and be a student. And I feel that has allowed me to grow in a lot of ways and open up new opportunities. So I guess all that is to boil down to say, don't ever stop learning. Don't ever stop finding new interests and pursuing them. And, that also gets back to that idea of, differentiating yourself in a job search that, if you keep building new skills and finding new things, you're going to have more ways to stand out from the crowd, more ways to grab those opportunities that do come along.
That's amazing advice. Dave, thank you so much for joining us on Double Reed Dish. This was wonderful. We really appreciate you spending this hour with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I had a great time.
All right. We hope you enjoyed that episode. It was fabulous. And the next one's going to be fabulous too. And so follow us on social media and enjoy. Galit, who's next?
I was just watching your face and just waiting to hear what came out of your mouth.
I need some go-go juice. I've still got work today.
Next, for the next episode, we had an awesome conversation with Melissa Bosma, who teaches oboe at the University of Texas at Arlington. Jackie, let's end this nerd parade.
Go make reads.